Hi there, I'm Aurelia. My sister once looked me in the eye and said I was useless, after I built the very company that paid for her red carpet dress and corner office. We started with a laptop on my kitchen floor. I wrote the code. I pitched the product. But somehow, she got the CEO title, and I got locked out of the system I designed. It wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated. Legal, polished, one boardroom, one signature. One phone call changed everything. They erased me from my own success, my name, my voice, even my father's pride. But how far did they go behind my back? And why was everyone silent? The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and for a moment, everything smelled like lavender and burnt coffee, the usual at DNA Systems. Seattle's gray morning bled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long reflections across the glass desk where I sat, typing the final integration specs for our newest logistics client. It was quiet, my kind of quiet, the kind where people worked instead of talked. I liked it that way. No attention, no headlines, just output. I didn't need spotlights. I built this company from silence, line by line, feature by feature. I led like a ghost in the system, and the numbers spoke for me. A Slack ping broke my flow. Dorian needs you upstairs, now. I grabbed my notepad. Not because I needed it, but because old habits die hard. On my way to the executive lounge, I passed the portrait wall. Only one photo had been added in the past year, Dorian's with a tech award I had won and he had accepted. When I stepped inside the lounge, my eyes locked instantly on her. Celeste. She was perched on the edge of the leather sofa like she'd never left, wearing a crimson blouse that screamed power and perfume that clung like a trap. Dorian stood beside her, beaming like someone who didn't see the blade pressed against his legacy. "Well, look who it is," she said, uncrossing her legs. "Long time no see, little sis." I felt the sting behind my ribs, but smiled the way you smile when you're in a room full of cameras. Polite, hollow. "I didn't know you were in town," I said, steady. "She wants to help," Dorian interrupted, "and I think it's time." Time. That word rang like a warning shot. Celeste hadn't touched this company in a decade, and now she wanted to help? No phone call, no email. Just a polished entrance, like she'd never abandoned the mess I cleaned up. She didn't hug me, didn't ask how I'd been, just showed up and sat down, like the throne had always been waiting. I walked out without asking questions. I didn't need to. Her presence was the answer. The next morning, I arrived early, as always. My mug was already warm when Dorian's assistant asked me to head to the conference room. The whole senior team was there. Not unusual. What was unusual was Celeste sitting at the head of the table, in my seat. Dorian cleared his throat. "Let's get started. As many of you know, our company's moving into a new growth phase." I knew that tone. It was the one he used before laying someone off. "With that in mind," he continued, "I'm proud to announce that Celeste will be joining as co-CEO. Effective immediately." I didn't blink. I didn't move. My title remained unchanged. CTO. But titles are window dressing. Power lives in access. And Celeste had just inherited half the keys without earning any of the locks. No discussion, no forewarning, no dignity. I kept my voice neutral when I leaned toward Dorian and said, "Was this your decision alone?" He avoided my eyes. Celeste, however, didn't flinch. "Don't take it personal, Ray. We need someone who can represent us on the outside. Tech's only part of the picture." It was that word, only, that hit hardest. Only tech. The architecture, the product, the patents, the growth. Only. The meeting moved on, but I didn't hear most of it. My focus shifted to faces, who was nodding, who was avoiding eye contact. Small things, micro-expressions. I'd learned to read them over years of being underestimated. When the room cleared, Marcus, one of our junior engineers, clapped Celeste on the back and said, "Damn, that was smooth." I started making notes that night. Not just code commits or client briefings, patterns, changes, the kinds of small shifts you notice when someone's trying to erase you slowly, methodically. By the end of that week, Slack channels changed. Projects were being assigned differently. Clients I had onboarded were now rerouted to Celeste's calendar. A junior dev mistakenly credited her for the inventory platform I had built from scratch. I didn't correct him, not yet. You don't react when you're being outpaced. You observe, you document, you wait. I began tagging email threads quietly, saving meeting transcripts, archiving access logs. The developer in me knew that every move left fingerprints, and Celeste was leaving hers all over things she hadn't touched before. I wasn't panicking. This wasn't panic. It was protocol. But I didn't know yet. This wasn't just about roles. It was a hostile takeover in lipstick. The first blow wasn't delivered in a meeting or a hallway ambush. It arrived on my screen, quiet, calculated, and already viral. That morning, I logged into our company portal to check a support backlog. But the page had changed. Celeste's face greeted me at the top, framed by a glossy rebrand, the new face of innovation. I clicked instinctively, and it redirected to a Forbes article already circulating on LinkedIn, Twitter, even tech subreddits. The headline hit harder than coffee: How Celeste Winters is Disrupting Legacy Systems in Tech. Legacy. I was apparently a relic now. In the article, she was quoted saying, "This platform is my baby. I've nurtured it from the ground up with a vision for modern businesses." I didn't blink. I didn't scroll. I just stared until the words burned. No mention of me, not one line about the dev team. No photo of the engineers who'd worked nights beside me, eating vending machine dinners and debugging broken features at 2 a.m. My voice caught in my throat, but I didn't let it rise. I just whispered to myself, she didn't just steal credit. She rewrote history and deleted me. By the time I walked into the leadership roundtable that afternoon, I had already rehearsed silence. Celeste was seated beside Dorian again, this time with her own placard. The room buzzed with low chatter, fake laughs, half-hearted caffeine. They were all waiting for her to speak. During the meeting, one of the product leads brought up our latest architecture update. "That rollout was seamless," he said. "One of the cleanest code transitions we've ever had." I didn't speak. I let the compliment hang, just long enough for it to float where it belonged. Then Celeste cleared her throat. "That was a team effort," she said, smiling. "I guided most of that. Lies are funny things. They don't even tremble when they're spoken with confidence." Then she turned toward me, and the entire room fell still. "You're great with code, Aurelia," she said casually, with that trademark patronizing tone. "But not everyone's cut out for leadership." I watched half the table flinch. The other half kept their eyes glued to their laptops, as if suddenly fascinated by calendar invites. Dorian didn't say a word. My jaw tightened, but I smiled. She didn't stab me. She peeled me open in front of witnesses, and none of them stepped in. No one defended me, not even Dorian, who once told me I had a mind like a machine, precise and relentless. Back in my office, I closed the door and sat there, hands resting on the desk, mind cycling through every word she said, every glance she stole, every inch of recognition she clawed away. I wasn't angry, not yet. But I was done pretending this was normal. Within a week, the tone inside the company shifted, subtly but clearly. Slack mentions went from routine to rare. I'd be tagged in dev threads late, after key decisions had been made. Project approvals that used to pass through my inbox now landed on Celeste's desk. A new junior exec, fresh from some overpriced MBA program, accidentally introduced her during a client call as one of the founding minds behind our platform. I raised an eyebrow. Celeste didn't correct him. Later that day, I walked past her office. She was laughing with Dorian, sipping some imported matcha like royalty. She'd built nothing, but now she was everything. I started recording every instance, every omission, every stolen moment, screenshots, emails, meeting transcriptions, anything that proved I had been there before she decided to wear my skin. I wasn't asking to be celebrated. I was demanding to be recognized for what I built, with my hands, with my sacrifice. It wasn't jealousy, it was justice. And I could feel the line she crossed harden into something irreversible. Because on Friday, during a town hall quanda, someone asked, "What do you think differentiates DNA from other software companies?" Celeste answered instantly. "Simplicity, leadership, vision." She paused, then added, "We cut through legacy code, old systems, useless processes." The word rang like a gunshot. Useless. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't have to. The room stayed quiet. That same still, afraid quiet that always follows cruelty when no one wants to get involved. My fingers dug into the armrest, but I didn't speak. Not yet. Let her have the podium. Let her think she owned the spotlight. Because if Celeste wanted a narrative war, she just started it. By Monday morning, I knew something was coming. You could feel it in the air, the kind of unease that creeps under the skin before a system crashes. The building felt colder, or maybe it was just me. There was a silence between the elevators and the hallway that hadn't existed before. I stepped out on our floor and stopped. My nameplate was gone. The office I had worked in for nearly 8 years, the space I had designed, the one with the server dashboard on one wall and sticky notes layered with handwritten algorithms on the other, was empty, bare. The desk wiped clean, not a paperclip out of place. HR called it a space optimization decision. Just a reshuffle, the assistant said over the phone. We thought this side room might suit your needs better. Fewer distractions. Fewer people, you mean? I didn't argue. I nodded politely. Then I packed my things, the few they hadn't already touched, and walked to the new room. It wasn't even a proper office, more like a converted copy nook. No window, buzzing overhead light that hummed off tempo. My chair didn't swivel right. The Ethernet cable dangled like a sad afterthought. Not a single person made eye contact as I walked past. They didn't fire me. They made me invisible. By Wednesday, my calendar had gone suspiciously blank. Meetings I used to lead were happening without me. I checked the ops dashboard. My admin access had been downgraded. No explanation. No notice. That afternoon, I ran into Ben, one of our younger execs, by the coffee machine. He smiled, clueless. Hey, I just saw the new roadmap. Pretty slick. Celeste's really got the vision thing down. I tilted my head. Which roadmap? He blinked. The one shared at this morning's exec sync. You weren't there? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That moment spoke louder than anything he could have said. I walked back to my new room, logged in, and tried to access the roadmap folder. Access denied. I built the system. Now I was locked out of it. Late that evening, I stared at my own reflection in the dark monitor. Not broken, just paused. The way a storm holds its breath before it hits. I decided to call Mom. I didn't need comfort. I just needed someone who remembered who I was. Before all this. She picked up on the second ring. Hi, sweetheart. I sat there, trying to phrase the thing without sounding bitter. I talked about the move, the meeting exclusions, the casual undermining. I kept it calm, factual. She was quiet. Then she sighed. Maybe this is just growing pains. Celeste is under a lot of pressure too. I felt my grip on the phone tighten. Pressure? Was I supposed to give her grace for dismantling my work just because she dressed it in heels and smiled through a press release? I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, "Thanks, Mom," and hung up. But the silence that followed her words said more than she knew. When your own mother offers sympathy to the person hurting you, it makes you wonder how long you've been misreading loyalty. Maybe love had always been conditional in our house. Quiet for one child, pride for another. Celeste knew that, and now she was using it as leverage. Back at the office, I began updating a personal spreadsheet. Nothing on company servers. Just my own list. Meetings missed. Approvals rerouted. Job titles changed without HR notification. The data told its own story. Like malware burrowing through a network, this wasn't chaos. It was strategy. Slow, deliberate. I'd seen this before. In failing systems, when one node starts getting isolated, it's not long before the rest of the network forgets it ever mattered. First, they move you. Then they mute you. Then they erase you. But I wasn't a node. I was the architect. There's a distinct tone your gut makes when something doesn't sit right. Not quite fear, not quite anger. It's more like an itch you can't scratch. And that's exactly what I felt the next morning when I opened my laptop and saw a red flag blinking in the corner of my screen. License check failed. At first I figured it was just a back-end hiccup. Happens sometimes when load balancing shifts overnight. But when I pinged the dev logs, the failure looped 3 times, then pointed to something I hadn't touched in months. Clause 18b. That wasn't part of our standard license language. I should know. I wrote it. My heart didn't race, but I leaned in, narrowed my eyes, and whispered to myself, "What did you do?" The clause was buried, 4 subpages deep into a vendor contract update Celeste had fast-tracked, while I was busy being excluded from the roadmap meetings. Its header read like something harmless, Asset Consolidation Protocol, but its content was poison dressed in Times New Roman. Effective upon signature, intellectual property derived from tools under shared strategic oversight shall be considered jointly owned. Strategic oversight. A vague, legally stretchable phrase. It meant nothing and everything. I dug deeper, combing through DocuSign logs and internal memos, and there it was, my signature, forged digitally by an assistant I had never worked with. The digital trail linked back to a firm in Manhattan. Name on the record, Harper Klein, a contract lawyer from Celeste's previous firm in New York. So that was the plan. Erase me not just from meetings or Slack threads, but from ownership itself. She wasn't just taking credit, she was reassigning history, line by line, clause by clause. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. My calendar pinged, but I ignored it. What was the point of meetings now, when every agenda had already been rewritten? I walked into her office that afternoon without knocking. Celeste was on the phone laughing softly, then turned to me with mock surprise. "Ray, you okay?" I didn't sit. "Clause 18B, I said flatly. "You slipped it into the vendor rollout under my name." She didn't even blink, just set the phone down slowly. "If you had paid more attention, you'd have caught it." It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it, like she was already rehearsing it in a mirror for weeks. I crossed my arms. "That software was mine, built before you showed up with your PowerPoints and buzzwords." She tilted her head like she pitied me. "This isn't personal, it's business," I smirked. "Funny, that's exactly what people say before I make it personal." Dorian walked by, paused at the doorframe, glanced between us, then kept walking. Of course he did. Celeste leaned back in her chair, drumming her fingers on the glass table like she was already bored with me. "You always made great things, Ray. But the world doesn't reward builders. It rewards storytellers." I didn't respond. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. That would have been giving her exactly what she wanted. A reaction she could spin into unprofessional conduct. Back at my desk, my broom closet with Wi-Fi, I opened a folder labeled Innovate Defense Protocol. It was my private repository, created long before Celeste even knew where the back-end servers were hosted. In it were copies of every architectural blueprint I'd written, the original copyright filings, every commit note with time-stamped authorship. I clicked open a file titled Independent IP Clause 22 Safeguard. My fingers moved like they had a mission. No panic, no fury, just code. Because if she wanted to play the contract game, I'd take her to court in the language she didn't speak. Mine. She had Harper Klein and a team of stylists for her magazine shoots. I had syntax and source control. She rewrote the rules. I wrote the code. The invitation said, "Celebrating 60 years of vision, Dorian Winters." But from the moment I walked through the ballroom doors, I knew it wasn't a celebration. It was a coronation. Downtown Seattle, Hotel Halcyon. Crystal chandeliers, a string quartet, and a red carpet that screamed curated opulence. The kind of event people post about but forget the next morning, unless something scandalous happens. I wore a tailored black sheath dress. Classic. Understated. Me. No one looked twice. Celeste arrived fashionably 10 minutes late, in a blazing red gown that could have doubled as a warning flare. Laughter followed her like perfume. Her arm looped through Dorian's. They walked in like royalty returning from exile. At the entrance, the host paused when reading my name. "Oh, right, table 5. Not at the front, not even near family, just far enough away to feel the message. She didn't plan a party, she planned a stage. Dinner started late. Everyone buzzed about Dorian's legacy, the company's rise, Seattle's tech boom. My name floated once or twice, mostly by people too young to remember where the first server rack was built. My garage. Celeste stood halfway through the main course, tapping her wineglass gently with a fork. "May I?" The quartet hushed, the lights dimmed just enough to create drama. A photographer stepped forward, right on cue. "I want to thank everyone here," she began, eyes shining, voice syrupy, "for coming to celebrate not just 60 years of wisdom from my father, but a new era for D&A systems." She gestured to Dorian, who beamed like a proud coach. Isolde kept her eyes on her bread plate. "I've been honored to return to a company full of potential," Celeste continued. "But potential must be unlocked, direction must be clear. That's why, after months of conversations, I'm humbled to accept the role of sole CEO, effective immediately." A pause. Then, like a skilled assassin, she twisted the knife with a smile. "Of course, my sister Aurelia has done amazing work on the technical front, but as we grow, it's essential we lead with vision, not just code." I didn't blink, not because it didn't hurt, but because pain loses its power when you see it coming. The room remained frozen. No applause, no gasps, just the awkward clinking of forks, suddenly unsure where to land. Dorian nodded beside her, complicit in silence. I looked toward Isolde. She didn't meet my eyes. She didn't have to. She already picked her daughter. And it wasn't me. She didn't just steal my title. She robbed me of their silence. Later that night, while stepping out for air, I passed by the staff hallway behind the ballroom. That's when I heard Marcus. My Marcus, the junior developer I had mentored since his first line of Python, the one I vouched for when he screwed up that database deployment last year. He was laughing. "With the way she got tossed tonight," he said to Celeste's assistant, "I'm surprised she didn't fake a tech emergency just to storm out." Laughter. Then the assistant replied, "Girl, please. She looked like she knew it was coming. Maybe that's why she dressed like a funeral." Another laugh. I didn't say a word. I didn't make a sound. I just turned around and walked slowly back to my table. The system didn't crash. It was rewritten from within. The betrayal didn't come from outside hackers. It came from trusted credentials. At the end of the night, I waited until most people were tipsy enough to forget details. I walked over to Dorian's table. He was laughing with a board member about stock projections. I placed a small wrapped box in front of him. "A little something?" I said softly. "Happy birthday, Dad." He blinked, caught off guard. Isolde didn't even lift her head. Inside the box was a photo album. One I had spent 3 months assembling. Every phase of the company. From the first check we couldn't cash, to the first patent filed under my name, to the day Dorian handed me a set of keys and said, "Make this place better than I did." That part didn't make the album. But I remembered. I walked out of that ballroom without another word. No scene, no tears, just a quiet exit. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but leaves a dent. I sent a single text to my lawyer. "Initiate fallback protocol." She turned the lights on herself. I'd already flipped the main breaker. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. While the ballroom emptied of champagne flutes and hollow praise, I sat in my home office with my laptop open, the soft blue glow casting long shadows across the walls. No music, no distractions, just me, a black coffee gone cold, and a desktop cluttered with contracts, code windows, and a single sticky note that read, Clause 22, License expiration, 3 a.m., May 11th. I had waited a long time for this window. They played the title game. I played the asset game. And while Celeste was busy printing invitations and booking photographers, I'd been scripting lines of legal and logical code, each one wired to a timer they never saw coming. By 2:43 a.m., the contracts were confirmed, the delivery sequence tested, and the automated messaging queued. At exactly 3 a.m., I placed a call to Mr. Kraus, my attorney of over 10 years. He answered on the second ring. "It's time," I said. "Initiate non-renewal across all Innovate Solutions assets tied to D&A systems." "No renegotiation?" he asked, just to be sure. "None," I replied. "Let it expire, cold." He didn't argue. He knew better. 3 minutes later, the first wave of emails launched. Subject line, Leadership changes at D&A. What this means for you. Recipients, every major client who licensed our flagship product. Every vendor that had tied their software integrations to our platform. And every employee who ever signed a contract citing my name on their onboarding packet. Inside the email was a single message. Effective immediately, the license agreement between Innovate Solutions LLC and D&A Systems, will not be renewed. Ownership of the IP remains with Innovate Solutions. For those seeking continuity, contact us directly to discuss migration pathways. By 3:41 a.m., I had over 40 red receipts. By 4 a.m., the replies started rolling in. One from a longtime client in Austin. If you're not in charge, we're not in business. Another from an education tech partner. We signed because of you, not because of her. And another. Please call us first thing. We're not staying if this is the direction. I didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't about revenge. This was reclamation. Respect isn't awarded at banquets or delivered with titles. It's built in silence, written into contracts, wired in line by line. At 8:55 a.m., I pulled into the DNA parking garage, same as always. No fanfare, no tantrum, no security escort. I still had access. For now. I walked straight to my floor. Celeste's new assistant did a double take but said nothing. By 9:02, I was seated at my old desk. A different room, same backbone. 3 minutes later, the door slammed open. Celeste. What are you doing here? She snapped, as if the office belonged to her DNA. I looked up from my laptop, calmly. Wrapping up some loose ends. Behind her, Dorian arrived half out of breath, clearly summoned in a panic. You were out of line last night, he said, pointing a trembling finger. And you, I said without missing a beat, were out of depth for the last 5 years. That shut him up. Celeste's voice rose. You've caused chaos, do you understand that? I leaned back, completely unshaken. What I understand is, this company was standing on software it doesn't own, run by a face it doesn't recognize. I stood, motioned to the monitor behind me, and pulled up the dashboard. License access? Revoked. Core product status? Offline. Support integrations? Redirected. Celeste's phone buzzed again, and again. Her face paled. A third buzz. Dorian checked his screen, eyes widening. You don't have the authority? She tried to bark. You never had the infrastructure. I cut in. She stepped forward, furious. This is illegal. I looked at her and said flatly, this is contractual. I tapped the screen again. A new set of notifications popped up. Client exit triggers, migration inquiries, support ticket spikes, 9:05. By now they've read everything. Every lie Celeste told. Every contract she glossed over. Every name that's signed not because of her, but because of me. Let her try to PR spin this one. I didn't leak a memo. I pulled the product. She tried to replace me with a speech. I replied with system failure. By 9:22 a.m., I had confirmation from 7 of our 10 biggest clients. They weren't just pausing contracts. They were terminating. Full stop. The emails were cold, corporate, and surgical. Exactly the tone Celeste liked to use. Now it was boomeranging. At 9:40, I received a calendar update. Emergency board session, 10 a.m. vertical bar, main conference room A. Celeste wasn't wasting time. Neither was I. I walked into that boardroom carrying 2 things. My tablet and a printed folder with 6 tabbed sections, each one color-coded, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with contract law. Dorian was already seated, face pale, hands clasped tightly. Celeste stood near the head of the long walnut table, speaking quietly with board chair Marin Liu and 2 other longtime members. Their expressions were strained, but not surprised. She saw me and rolled her eyes like I was late to my own funeral. Marin gave me a shallow nod. We'd like to keep this contained, she said. Internal disruption isn't good for public confidence. Then I suggest everyone here put their phones face down and ears wide open, I said, placing the folder on the table. Celeste scoffed. This isn't a courtroom, Ray. I looked at her flatly. No, but you're about to wish it was. I clicked my tablet and projected the first document on the screen. Clause 22 of the Innovate Licensing Agreement, Proprietary Ownership Structure, expires May 11th at 3 a.m., was not renewed. Next slide. Clause 6. Unauthorized access post-expiration constitutes breach of contract and intellectual trespass. Slide 3. Backend logs, IP addresses, timestamps, and user accounts. All tracing back to her assistant's credentials, accessing my code at 3:17 a.m. I built this system, I said, eyes locked on Celeste. You didn't just overstep, you trespassed. The room went still. Celeste crossed her arms, chin high. You're being dramatic. Marin looked at the logs. These are your servers? I nodded once. My servers, my codebase, my contracts. Celeste waved a hand. We're talking about software, not bloodlines. I didn't flinch. Interesting, because you've been acting like you inherited the company in a will. One board member cleared his throat. Let's focus. Aurelia, are you saying legal grounds exist for a claim? I handed out printed notices from clients. No, I'm not saying it, they are. One letter was from Zilix Tech. Due to breach of leadership continuity and loss of IP security, our agreement with DNA is nullified immediately. Another, pending legal review, we advise against further transactions with DNA. Celeste started to panic. Her face tightened and she spoke too fast. This is all being twisted. No one said we couldn't revisit contracts. The IP was always collaborative. I cut her off. I wrote every line of that product in my own name, years before your return. You knew that. You ignored that. And now you'll face that. Dorian finally spoke up. We were trying to modernize. You were resistant. I turned toward him. You call what she did modernization? I tapped the last file. It showed Celeste authorizing a contract transfer without board-wide consensus. Board Chair Liu exhaled. Celeste, you said she had no leverage. She doesn't? Celeste blurted. She's acting out. I smiled. No, Celeste, I'm acting legally and strategically, two things you clearly underestimated. A board member asked softly, What's your end goal, Aurelia? Clarity, I said, accountability, and a company that doesn't reward theft with titles. There was no shouting, no tantrums, just silence, tight and suffocating. Finally, Liu tapped her pen and said, We'll need to convene privately. Legal counsel will advise. I gathered my things slowly, letting the silence linger. As I reached the door, I turned and looked straight at Celeste. This boardroom is your fortress? I said, calm as glass. Good. I hope you enjoy watching it collapse from the inside. The room didn't explode after I left. It imploded. I could feel the weight of it even through the walls as I walked past reception. The stunned silence, the calculated stares, the half-sentences waiting to be spoken in private corners and encrypted group chats. The truth was already doing its job. By the time I reached my office, my inbox had turned into a digital confession booth. Anonymous tips, apologies, screenshots. But one email stopped me cold. It was from a junior attorney, Megan Kessler. She'd been a silent shadow at most legal meetings, always scribbling notes, rarely speaking. Subject, FYI leaked doc, Larkhill proposal. Attached was a PDF titled, Preliminary Terms, Acquisition of D&A Systems by Larkhill Tech Group. I scanned the first few lines. Pending resolution of internal ownership disputes. Timeline assumes IP control fully transfers within 30 days. The signature at the bottom? Celeste Winters. No mention of the board, no CC to legal, and definitely no trace of me. So that's what all this was about. Not just ego, not just image. She wasn't trying to lead DNA. She was trying to sell it. Fast, quiet, and clean. And I was the final signature standing in the way. I closed the document, exhaled slowly, then pressed record on my private audio journal. She wanted me out of the picture because I was the paperwork. I said softly. The inconvenient truth in every clause. I didn't feel rage, just a kind of precision. At 11:03 a.m., I requested a private meeting with Celeste and Dorian. No board, no staff, no lawyers, just us. They arrived 5 minutes late. Celeste's heels clicked like gunshots across the floor. Dorian's smile was tight and rehearsed. Make it quick, Celeste said, dropping into the chair across from me. Don't worry, I replied, sliding a folder toward her. This won't take long. Inside were 3 documents. A formal withdrawal letter from Zilix Tech, citing loss of executive trust. A contract termination from Core Grid Analytics. Failure to uphold licensing transparency. A spreadsheet listing 27 employees, engineers, designers, ops staff, who had already signed contracts with Innovate Solutions, effective next Monday. She glanced at Dorian. He looked away. Here's how this ends, I said calmly. You resign within 24 hours. You walk out with your head up, your exit polished, your resume spotless. Celeste blinked. You're bluffing. I didn't move. You'd like to think that. Dorian leaned forward. Aurelia, be reasonable. This isn't good for anyone. I turned to him. You knew she was courting a buyout without informing the board. You didn't stop her. That makes you complicit, not neutral. His face darkened. Celeste snapped. You'd sabotage your own legacy just to spite me? I shook my head. I didn't sabotage anything. You did. I'm just cutting the wires before your bomb goes off in everyone's face. She stood. You can't force this. I stood too. I don't have to. Larkhill already pulled out. Their legal team caught wind of the clause breaches this morning. You tried to sell a house you didn't own. Silence again, but this one was heavier, deeper, not just corporate, personal. You wanted power, I added. Now you have a choice. You can walk today, quietly, or you can stay and watch what scorched earth looks like with your name on it. Celeste said nothing. I reached into my folder and pulled out one more document. Your severance. It's fair. It's clean. And the reference letter? Already written. It paints you as strategic, innovative, and visionary. Dorian looked stunned. Why? He asked. Because I'm not like her, I said, and because I'm tired of fighting. Celeste stared at the paper, then slowly took the pen. No words, no glares, just a signature. When she was done, she pushed it back, gathered her things, and left without saying goodbye. I didn't watch her walk out. I sat down, turned to my screen, and started drafting the announcement. Leadership Update D&A Systems. The words came easy. She took the corner office, I took the company. The announcement hit inboxes by 6 a.m. I didn't reread it. I didn't need to. I'd lived every syllable. And still, when I stepped into the office that morning, the silence nearly knocked the breath out of me. The kind of quiet that didn't come from absence, but from aftermath. People nodded at me with cautious politeness. Some offered soft smiles. A few avoided eye contact altogether. It wasn't celebration. It was awareness. Reverence, maybe. Or relief. Celeste's nameplate was already gone from the door. No speech, no farewell cake, no framed photo with a fake quote printed on canvas. Just gone. I stood outside the glass-walled office, staring at the new placard someone had posted. Aurelia Winters, CEO. No exclamation mark, no tagline, just black text on brushed steel. I closed the door behind me and sank into the chair. Same chair I'd sat in 1,000 times as CTO. Same view, same desk. But it felt heavier now, like stepping into a house that used to be yours, only to find someone had moved all the furniture an inch to the left. On the corner of the desk sat the small wrapped box I had left at the gala, the photo album. I hadn't opened it. Not then. Not when I walked away from Dorian without waiting for him to unwrap it. Not when I cleared out the betrayal from the code base. But now, I finally peeled back the paper. Inside were snapshots, black and white grainy prints from the early years. Me in oversized glasses sitting on the floor with cables tangled around my feet. A whiteboard sketch with DNAV01 written in Sharpie. A printed quote taped to the corner. We start small. We stay sharp. My handwriting. And at the very back, a post-it, yellowed with time. For the ones they underestimated. Dad. I stared at that handwriting until my eyes blurred. There was no dramatic music, no standing ovation, just me, alone, holding the thing I'd almost given up to people who couldn't spell integrity without a lawyer. Dorian retired the next week. He sent a group email citing health, clarity, and quality time with family. We spoke briefly at Thanksgiving. He told me the turkey was dry. I told him it wasn't the bird's fault. Isolde dropped by once in December. She didn't mention Celeste, just commented on the office plants and brought me homemade peach cobbler. The kind she used to make when things were okay. We didn't talk about the company. We didn't talk about family, but she hugged me a little longer than usual before leaving. As for Celeste, she vanished like a glitch in a live demo. Word had it she took a job in San Jose. Something about a product strategist position. Mid-level, no press release, no public statement, and not a single message to me. I didn't expect one. Some wounds don't bleed. They just stay beneath the skin, waiting for pressure. But I wasn't bleeding anymore. I wasn't bitter either. I was rebuilding. And this time, I wasn't building for headlines. I launched a mentorship initiative, one-on-one coaching for women in back-end engineering, no media hype, no PR filter, just code, guidance, and growth. We branded the new platform, built by quiet hands, because that's what we were. Quiet, consistent, relentless. I didn't hold town halls or press junkets. I didn't need to. I led in the background, but not in the shadows, and slowly, very slowly, the company began to shift. Not with fanfare, but with trust. Engineers spoke up more. Teams experimented faster. Clients returned. Not because of the name, but because they knew who stood behind the product again. And one night, late, long after the others had gone home, I found myself placing that old photo album on the shelf behind my desk. I didn't do it for nostalgia. I did it for closure. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't the same as forgetting. It was choosing not to carry the same weight twice. Celeste had called me useless, but I built an empire in the quiet, and I walked away with everything that mattered. Some victories come loud, others arrive in silence. Mine didn't need applause because peace was louder than any boardroom cheer. Looking back, if I could offer one truth, it's this: never confuse being quiet with being weak. For years, I kept my head down, thinking loyalty and hard work would speak for themselves. But in the real world, especially in business, silence can be mistaken for consent. I had to learn that protecting your worth doesn't make you difficult. It makes you honest. And family? It's complicated. Love doesn't always come with fairness. Sometimes the people closest to us betray us the hardest, not because they hate us, but because they never imagined we'd stand up and say enough. So here's what I want to leave you with. You are not too soft. You are not too late. You are not too much. You are exactly enough for the empire you're meant to build, the boundaries you're learning to draw, and the future you still get to shape. Maybe your Celeste isn't a sister. Maybe it's a boss, a partner, a parent, or even that voice in your head. But whatever tries to rewrite your story, remember, you hold the pen. You set the terms. You can walk away whole. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to take your power back, quietly or not? What would you have done differently if you were in my shoes? Or maybe you're still in your chapter 3, holding your breath and waiting for the right moment to rise. If so, let this be your sign. You're not alone. If this story touched you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't hit the mark for you, let me know why. I'm listening. Whether you're in Seattle like me or tuning in from somewhere across the country, I'm grateful you're here. And if you want more stories like this, raw, real, and rooted in the things that matter, hit that subscribe button and join this growing community. Your voice matters here. Until next time, take care of your peace, because no title is worth your soul.